Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Be Freaking Awesome. I am one of your hosts, Sami Kittison, here with Angela Belford. And Angela, I don't know that we can actually get started without acknowledging the balloon garland in the room.
Can't leave that elephant just hanging there.
can't leave it just hanging out there. 1 week ago, you launched Traveling Light, the book. Woo, woo, woo. And if you are watching on YouTube, you can see very obviously we still have some of the party leftovers, a 15-foot balloon garland and nice little banners sitting behind you.
What's funny is that yesterday I had a marketing strategy call with a client, and this has just become part of my reality. And so I totally didn't even acknowledge it. And so we get on this marketing strategy and I'm about to start talking about a website. And he's like, are you selling luggage? And I was like, oh yeah, hi. There's all this gear. I forgot to turn on a virtual background. My hair does not work with a virtual background. So anyway, it was so funny because this is the water I swim in. Life's a party. I
absolutely love it. This fall, we really want to talk about a lot of the content within the Traveling Light book. Now that you guys all have it and can look at it and can read it, and even if you aren't going to read it, there's just so much that we have things to say. We've got words to unpack and things that we want to talk about. Even though Angela wrote them, I feel like there's conversations to be had. There's things we're going to dive in deeper on. And so whether you read the book or don't read the book, I still think that you'll be able to get a lot out of this fall. Some of the things, it's like we took this one little paragraph and we're like, all right, now this one paragraph, we really want to dive in a whole lot more on that. And then other things, it's like, yeah, that whole chapter, we feel good about what, that's covered in the book. We'll keep going. So it's not going to be like a chapter by chapter breakdown of the book, but there's just some different concepts that we're going to be digging into more throughout this fall.
Oh my gosh. And we're going to be talking to some life coaches. We're going to be talking to a sex coach. We're going to talk to I'm super excited about some of the guests that we have coming up to kind of expound upon the content. So
it's going to be very fun. To really start that though, I don't know that this is a new concept for us at all, but we wanted to just take a moment and pause and invite everyone to live an examined life and to live an intentional life and talk about what that means and what that looks like. And so as we start to dig into these things, it's kind of setting the foundation, the framework, some initial beliefs. I don't think these beliefs are brand new, like we haven't had them throughout the entire podcast, but it's taking a moment to actually just really say it all out loud.
We are going to really talk through some Greek this fall, too, because this idea of an examined life, I told somebody the other day, remember Solomon wrote 5,000 years ago, there's nothing new under the sun. And so there's not. But also, it still always surprises me when there's a concept that I believe in, and then I find out that Socrates wrote an unexamined life is not worth living. I say I found that out. I think I put that in my first book, but also how you have something and it comes back up and it means something more. And so I love that they were talking about this thousands of years ago as well, that an unexamined life is not worth living. And I think for me, it's because it feels like you're just floating, just coasting, which there's nothing wrong with rest. We are going to talk extensively about rest. But I think that the idea of just not having any intentionality about how you show up in the world, it's just, that's not a life philosophy that I can get behind. And that's not to say that everybody has to be a high performer or a high achiever, but the idea that you would not ever look critically at your life and be able to see, how am I impacting others? How are others impacting me? What is my legacy going to be? How can I bring joy? How do I want to just be in this human experience? Makes me very happy.
I love that. My pop culture reference that always comes to mind when we think about an examined life is a song from Wicked that actually is about the opposite. To me, the song is deeply tongue in cheek. It is not, as the show goes on, you learn like it doesn't really work out. But it's like life is fraughtless when you're thoughtless. Those who don't try never look foolish. Dancing through life, mindless and careless, things like that. And at one point, it says the magic is learning how to live an unexamined life. This does not work out well for the character. I don't want to spoil anything too much, but it's a very fun song that I like to belt out, dancing through life as if I do live an unexamined life, which I don't. I really live life very intentionally. Right now, I actually have been in a pretty deeply significant, but really significant season of reflection. I am coming up on my 29th birthday. It'll actually be this Saturday, September 9th. And I don't have a whole lot of like big feelings about turning 30. I am excited for it. I guess I do have some feelings, but it's not like, oh no, my life is over. Where it has really led me is that there are things that I do want to be intentional about in my 20s. Like this is my last year of my 20s that I'm going into. What is it that I want to make sure to do? And so I have been really thinking about what do I want this last year to be? How do I, of my last year of my 20s, how do I want to set myself up well for my 30s? How am I living intentionally? So I've been working on a 30 before 30 list, and it's been really a lot of fun to put together some items. There's also an element of it that has been just uniquely tricky, and that I tried to like Google other people's 30 before 30 lists and get some ideas from that. And I am pretty good at living an intentional life so far and doing things. And
I hear some reticence in your voice. So I'm going to stop and be the life coach for a moment and encourage you. This is a moment to celebrate, because so much of our life, when we are living an examined life, we are looking critically at our life, and we sometimes can let the pendulum swing and we don't stop and acknowledge and celebrate. So we're going to stop and acknowledge and celebrate. That's amazing that you've lived an intentional life. What are some examples of things that other people put on their 30 before 30 that you're like, check, check, check? And maybe they don't wait to make these lists until they're 29. So maybe that's why the list, if you would have made this at 21, then this would have made sense. But what are some examples?
A lot of travel that I have done and I do a lot of travel in my life. And so I don't really have travel regrets. I still have more things to do on my list, but not things that I'm like, oh man, I can't believe I didn't travel a lot in my 20s. Things like skydiving. There's a lot of risk-seeking activities. I feel like that's a bundle of things, of the adrenaline seeking. Skydiving, bungee jumping. I actually haven't gone bungee jumping, but not really for like a lack of desire. It's like a lack of opportunity. I just don't live somewhere with tons of bungees. It's more skydiving here, which feels like a bigger deal to do than bungee jumping. But in any case, there's some things like that. There's a lot of stuff that's just like start a 401k and have a budget. There's some like basic adulting things that I have been doing for a long while. I did get a leg up on it in that when I graduated college, I married somebody who had already had a job, already had a house, already had a lot of these things settled. So I do know that I had the privilege of some steps ahead of some of my fellow, I don't know, graduates that year that I started ahead of the game. And
he had just bought that house like 3 months before you guys get married, 4 or 5 months before.
Sure.
Still, the fact that he had a job for 2 years and he was able to buy a house. Yes, that is good to recognize privilege. That's good.
So there's just a lot of things like that, though, that are adulting type things, risk seeking type things. I've done a lot of that. I'm not really risk averse when it comes to, the adrenaline junkie things. And I don't have a lot of those on my list because I'm like, yeah, I already did that. That doesn't feel like a big deal for my last year of my 20s.
This reminds me of the list that when I was a life coach in my life coach certification, they said you need to make a list of 25 things that you want. And I had a little bit of a hard time with this list because I was like, I've done a lot of these things. I've done a lot of the travel things. I've raised my kids. I've, all of these different things, until they added the caveat. You can add onto your list things that you have that you want to keep. And it reminds me of the quote that says, the trick to happiness, or the key to happiness, is wanting the life you have. And I love the idea of that, from like cultivating gratitude, and even just stopping and recognizing the things that I now have that 5 years ago I wanted. Like I wanted to redo my deck. I wanted to redo my basement. I have those done. And so there was this moment for me when I was like, what is wrong with me that I don't want more things in life, that I don't want? I can't think of 25 things I want. And I mean, I didn't want, like, I don't know, I guess I wanted them to be meaningful. And then when I was like, oh, let's remember that some of the stuff I have now, I wanted 5 years ago. So celebrate, gratitude, acknowledge, and thank past self for doing the work, so that I get to current self gets to live a pretty cool life,
Yeah. So one of my tools that I have used, ironically, not on purpose, but has led to be really good for life reflection. I make a lot of lists, and I keep running lists. And so I have journaled since I was a senior in high school. So 10 plus years now that I have been consistently journaling. And I have a couple of lists that I've actually transferred digitally that I keep in my Google Drive documents that help me reflect back on the things that I've accomplished. And so, like, I have a travel list that is my travel history from 2016 till now. And every weekend trip that I do, anytime I leave town for an overnight, it gets documented. It gets documented where I went, who I went with, how long. And being able to look back at those things, there's a lot of times that I forget weekend trips, that I don't remember I went to the lake with this friend or I did something else. And so that has been a helpful thing for me. In addition, there are things that it's like what would you buy if money wasn't an object? We keep that list. And that list stays pretty short, because there's a lot of things that I either just buy because it makes sense to buy it, or that's dumb and I don't actually end up buying it. Like, it's a relatively short list, but there's times where I do want to recognize, like, if I ever feel like, oh, you don't get to spend any money, or you're saving a lot right now. It's like, you have bought a lot of things to help make your life better. And these things might feel frivolous. And it also helps me not get caught up in like impulse buys, particularly large impulse buys, because I have to put it on my list and then I can circle back to it within a relative amount of time. And I think that people can keep these lists with anything. I also have a list of friends, and sometimes people, it can be a little bit of a controversial thing. I think we may have talked about this in the friendship episodes, that I have lists of friends that I can kind of generally rank. There's just different types of friends. Rank is not the right word. Categorize would be a better word. It helps me to remember that, like, connections and relationship is something in my life that I've also been really intentional with. It's not passing. All of these things, when I take this moment of reflection, I really try to like take stock. Like, what do I have going on? What are my finances? What are my relationships, my connections? What are the experiences that I've wanted to have? And that's my approach that I've been going about this. Like, what am I wanting to do before I'm 30? What's interesting is what's coming up for me right now is I actually want to do more of certain things. There's things that like make me feel like myself. There are things that I have more recently like engaged in. And for example, rock climbing is something I actually really love. Rock climbing, that activity, not necessarily as a sport. It's more of a hobby, but I want to do more of that in this year. I want to do more of the things that bring me joy and the things that bring me satisfaction. And so that's what's ending up a lot on my list. And there's a couple of challenges as well. So like I want to travel solo. I travel a lot with other people, but I don't travel solo very often. And I'm sharing all of this hopefully to give people ideas of like when you think about living an examined life and you're like, well, I don't even know where to start. Some of it is just taking stock. Take a moment to think about what's going on in your life. What are the things that you have? Imagine you're going into the closet of your life and just taking a look around. You don't have to change anything first. You don't have to make big, grand, sweeping gestures, but notice what is here. And then you can take the next step of evaluating what are we wanting to do with it. Angela, you look like you have a thought ready.
I do have a thought ready, and it makes me super happy because we say we're talking about traveling light, but we know that my two books are very cohesive and they work together very well. And so we, in Be Freaking Awesome, we have the Wheel of Life and we talk about grand goals. And what I love is that grand goals are more like the idea of how I want to show up in the world, how I want to be in the world. And I just want to talk through the different areas of the Wheel of Life quickly so that way people, if they are making some kind of list, then you can, in Be Freaking Awesome, what I encourage is for you to set like 3 things you want in each area of each of these 10 areas. And then to focus on 3, because that would create 30 different things, but just pick 3 things of the list from the list of 30. But the areas are giving and contribution, play and fun, family and friends, spirituality, health and finances, love and romance, artistic and creative, health and body, business and career, and personal fulfillment. Now, we have had episodes where if you go back to some of our earlier episodes, we've gone and unpacked each one of those separately, and we'll make a list in the show notes for everyone. But the thing is that specifically when you, in that family and friends area, one year I had just put on the list more girlfriend time. And I knew that at that season of life, I think I wrote that during a season when I was very crazy busy with all of the kids that we still had at home. And it has continued. It sort of became a part of the way I show up in the world so that then I can decide, oh, I need to make time to go and have lunch, have coffee, just hang out, go for a walk, whatever, with friends. And so as you guys are making the list, if it's hard for you to decide on the 30 before 30 or whatever age you are, you could do 40 before 40. Then you could potentially look at those
34 before 34. Like, who cares? Doesn't have to be on a big milestone.
You could, indeed. You could just decide one of the intentions that I set is I want to be stronger at 60 than I was at 40. And for me, that's physically stronger. And so like right now at 50, I can ride my bike farther than I could when I was 40. And I want to continue to be stronger because the statistics say that as I age, once you hit 40, then your muscle mass just naturally declines unless you are intentional about, like I'm probably about to start some sort of weightlifting routine, not because I care about that, but because I want to be stronger at 60 and because I've seen the statistics on what our bodies just naturally do. So I want to kind of get ahead of that game, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I like all of that. I definitely use the Wheel of Life in my evaluation of things because that's just been a part of my vocabulary for so long now of looking at those different areas.
Yeah.
I also think that I want to say this one with like a really big caveat. Sometimes looking to other people that you have things like or live in a way that you admire. And I want to say admire, not envy, because I think if it's envying or being jealous, then maybe let's do some work. But things that you admire, what is it that you admire about them and that you want to emulate yourself? And what would it take to get there? That's another I don't know, place to look to.
I think that the way Barry and I live our life is actually a direct result of something like that. I remember we were in a small group when my kids were little, and there was a couple, and he traveled for business, and his wife went with him a lot of the time. And so they were probably at least once a month, had a long weekend. And then I may have even gotten my whole travel philosophy from them. I can't remember if it was them or if I honed it, but, I like to about one weekend a month be traveling if I can. And then 1 week a quarter, I like to be somewhere. And then I now have added to where I want to have at least 2 weeks where I'm like completely shut off once a year, that I don't do anything else. And so we front end loaded this year with a lot of our travel. And so the back half of our year is a little bit slower paced for us, but it was definitely from seeing how other people lived their life. And I say all the time, that is what my intention is like, I am your emptiness role model. That's what I do and how we live our life. Because with the thing about travel is that I also have recognized that I love maintaining my relationships. And if I travel a little too much, then I don't have enough time at home to invest in the relationships that I want to invest in. So that's been an interesting learning this year as well in my life of living an examined life.
I like it. So as I'll just, for me, as I'm going into my 29th birthday and the 29th year, maybe I will share some of my items, my 30 before 30 list. It's actually not done yet. I still have a few days. I still got some time that I'm going to work on it. And I've probably got about half of the list right now. So maybe as we go forward, I'll share some of the items, or I'll share things as I do them throughout this year. That might be fun.
I would say one more thing. I would really love to see you do a success list as well. And sounds like you've been doing that with your experiences and your relationships. But specifically, I think another thing of this examined life is also recognizing our successes, because sometimes when you're in the perseverance mode where you're having to overcome obstacles, you forget how many obstacles you've already overcome to get here. And I remember when I had to make the list of 100 successes that I got to, and I was only 26 when I made this list. So it was like, I learned how to ride a bike. So don't be afraid to really recognize that younger you did learn things too. You learned how to write your name. You learned how to do calculus. You learned how all of those things, and recognizing those successes will also help you live this examined life.
What's interesting, think about learn how to write your name. There are things that I think about from my children's perspective, like, oh yeah, you have to be taught how to do this thing, like how to tie your shoes, how to write your name. And that's on me. I got to start teaching you how to do some of those things. We've talked about that a lot, that you have processed some different things from your childhood as I hit those ages. I right now have actually been processing some of my turning 29. I remember you turning 29, and it's been interesting for me to think about, even just that my kids are going to remember this. And, they've been so young for so long that 2-year-olds probably not going to remember a whole lot, but at a certain point, they absolutely are. And golly, man, you had 3 kids by 29 and so much.
I had an 8-year-old.
You had an 8-year-old.
I had an 8-year-old.
And it's just been really, really interesting. I am planning on having a hopefully pretty large birthday party for 29 this Saturday. And I remember going to your 29th birthday party. It's a very funny story, just real quick from that. One of your friends, I was the one who was putting candles on the cake, and they came up to me and I knew them from church, and they were like, come on, Sami, she's really lying about it. She's turning 30. She's just lying, right? Like you're putting 30 candles on there because she's lying. She's turning, who throws a 29th birthday party? They throw 30th birthday parties. And I, at 8, like, started to get upset. Like, no, Mr. Andy, I'm not lying. I promise I'm not lying. That's 29. Like, and he kind of realized, like, oh gosh, I took the joke a little too far. Like, made an 8-year-old start crying because I called her a liar. But
I was of the mindset I was not going to celebrate any more birthdays after 29. That was just the end. Like, I was already old.
Well, you had 3 kids, including an 8-year-old, so you kind of were old. Well, I
kind of was old.
Sorry, I don't mean it the way it sounded like, but
no, but like from season of life standpoint, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I, even like in my neighborhood, there's a lot of people when they find out that I'm under 30, they're like, oh my gosh, you're a baby. And my neighbor, I love her, Diana, was like, she's not, she's practically mid-30s. She has 2 kids already. Leave her alone. I do think it's funny how sometimes we view season of life as a better indicator of what your age is rather than actually what your age is. So that's why I'm curious to see if anybody else listening is surprised to learn I'm only turning 29. I know a lot of people have been telling me for a long time, you're such a baby, you're so young. And I'm like, one day that will change.
Yes, it will, because people used to tell me that when I had an 8-year-old and they were like, oh my God, I can't believe you're only 29. And then eventually they stopped saying that.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Then I had a grandchild when I was 45. So they started saying it again.
And also, what is it? Age is a mindset and a frame of reference. You're in the youth of your old age, and I'm in like the middle age of my youth. So, which is kind of what 30s are. People do treat that like the middle age of your youth. Wow, that's really accurate. Anyway, yeah, thank you guys for listening here. We hope that there's some, tip or exercise that you guys are able to take today as you start to examine your own lives, as you continue to examine your lives. I don't think it's really a process that starts and stops necessarily. There's deciding I'm going to be intentional, and then the continuation of being intentional and learning different ways to approach that. So I hope that something today sort of sparked you in that journey and on your quest to get to know yourself a little bit more. And I hope you guys are ready for the fall and for all of this exciting content that we're going to go through. If you haven't bought Traveling Light yet, you can go do so still. And you can go buy our Amazon #1 best-selling book, Traveling Light, wherever you get your books. So thank you guys for listening today, and we hope you guys go be freaking awesome.